Picture the hum of Lower Manhattan on a late summer Monday in 2001. You can almost feel the sticky evening air, hear taxis sliding by, and see neon reflections pooling on wet pavement. Somewhere in that colourful blur walks Dr. Sneha Philip, 31 years old, emergency room resident, dressed casually after a long shift. She steps out of her Battery Park City apartment around 7, tells her husband she plans to pick up household items, and disappears into the city she loves. By dawn, hijacked planes will turn the skyline into smoke and steel confetti. Yet before the first tower is struck, Sneha is already gone. You might wonder how a physician can vanish in a neighborhood crowded with cameras and night owls. Investigators wondered the same thing. Security footage catches Sneha at 8:10 that evening inside a department store near the World Trade Center. She is relaxed, browsing clothes and bedding, chatting with a cashier, paying with her own American Express card. Bags in hand, she walks back onto the street and melts into pedestrian traffic. After that clip, the record freezes. No video shows her entering the subway. No camera shows her returning home. And no witness comes forward to say, "I saw her there." It is as though the city swallowed her whole. Earlier that day, you would have found Sneha in a courthouse addressing a minor legal issue. She had been arrested after a bar dispute months earlier, and the appearance wrapped up by afternoon. She called her mother from the courthouse steps, sounding upbeat, promising to visit the following weekend. She then met her brother for drinks in Greenwich Village, laughing about family gossip, inviting him to eat Thai food later in the week. Around 5:30, she headed home, greeted her husband, computer programmer Ron Lieberman, and the two napped. Ron, scheduled for an early shift at St. Vincent's, left the apartment at 6:45 on September 11th, expecting to see his wife asleep when he returned. Her side of the bed stayed empty. You know the timeline that follows. At 8:46, the North Tower is hit. Ron, still commuting, rushes toward the hospital to prepare for incoming casualties. Phones crackle, fires roar, and the city's grid becomes a maze of dust and sirens. Ron tries to reach Sneha. Every call fails. He imagines her tending to victims at a triage site, because that would be typical for her, always moving toward the crisis. When he finally makes it back to Battery Park City that evening, the neighborhood is locked down like a war zone. National Guard troops wave him away. He spends the night on a co-worker's couch, convinced his wife is somewhere saving strangers. 24 hours pass before he files the missing person report. The officers who finally take that report are already drowning in tragedy. Almost 3,000 names are streaming into their system, so one additional missing adult seems like a footnote. Files pile up, leads evaporate, and Sneha's case threadbare from the start. Detectives review her American Express statement and see the last purchase, $100 at Century 21. They find no later activity. Her MetroCard, dormant. Her cell phone, silent. Her bank account, untouched. The city's dust covers everything and everyone, including the clues. Even the apartment becomes contaminated. Ash from the collapsed towers seeps through vents, coating sneakers by the door. When technicians test that dust months later, they find traces of human remains from ground zero, making forensic certainty impossible. Evidence literally disintegrates in real time. Without hard proof, theories breed. The police take a pragmatic path. Maybe Sneha chose not to come back. They discover that she sometimes stayed out all night, visiting lesbian clubs, drinking heavily, occasionally experimenting with recreational drugs. A colleague mentions that hospital supervisors had disciplined her for lateness. An argument with Ron months earlier ended with her spending days at a friend's place. To detectives, that pattern whispers voluntary disappearance. Her family pushes back. You can hear the frustration in her mother's voice during interviews. She says yes, Sneha partied, but she always called, always surfaced. She had just stocked up on linens and lingerie. Does that sound like someone preparing to vanish forever? The family hires private investigators who comb shelters and morgues. They find nothing, and that, paradoxically, fuels hope that she died a hero at the towers, not a runaway in shame. Think about the surveillance net you live under today. 2 decades ago, that net had holes big enough to drive a fire truck through. Cameras overwrote tapes every 24 hours. Downtown businesses without power after the attacks never preserved their footage. The subway system kept videos only when crimes were reported, and on September 11th, the Transit Authority had bigger problems. Investigators therefore rely on a single fuzzy clip from a camera fixed high on Church Street. They enhance it, slow it, color correct it, and still cannot decide whether the figure walking toward the towers in the last minutes before impact is Sneha, or just another woman with similar hair. If you pause the image, the pixels seem to pulse like a heartbeat, daring you to make the call. Numbers, unlike pixels, appear solid, yet even they wobble under scrutiny. American Express generates a tentative authorization for Sneha's card at 9:28 on the morning of September 11th. Investigators cannot confirm whether the purchase finalized because the company's servers were disrupted. Was that a delayed ping from last night's shopping spree, or an attempt to buy breakfast near the towers? The same ambiguity haunts a debit transaction flagged at an ATM close to City Hall. The machine's camera was destroyed, the receipt lost, the timestamp drifting several minutes off. You can almost hear detectives sighing as they pore over spreadsheets that refuse to reveal a personality behind the digits. In this mystery, even math plays hide and seek. Years roll by, and the battle shifts from the streets to the courts. Ron and Sneha's parents petition the state to list her as an official victim of the attacks, a designation that would grant not only benefits, but also a measure of narrative closure. The medical examiner resists, citing lack of biological remains. Hearings unfold like a grim drama, each side calling witnesses. A judge asks Ron, "Do you really believe your wife walked into that burning tower?" Ron answers, "I know she would have tried to help. You can almost feel the air leave the room." After multiple appeals, in 2008, the court finally adds Sneha to the roll of the dead. Her name joins the bronze panels at the memorial, letters catching sunlight just like the rest. But even official lists cannot answer the question still rattling in your mind. Where did Sneha spend those final hours? If she walked to the towers, why does no nurse recall her? If she vanished elsewhere, why leave shopping bags behind? One theory suggests she met someone for a spontaneous night out, got into trouble, and the chaos of the attacks erased every trace. Another imagines an accident in a construction site. Concrete poured over the evidence. You notice how each hypothesis leans on circumstance rather than character. The people who loved Sneha describe her as impulsive, brilliant, stubborn, compassionate. In their stories, she is always moving, always helping, always late but never missing. That description refuses to fit neatly inside any folder labeled runaway, victim, or perpetrator. Perhaps the harshest truth is that Sneha's story was eclipsed before it even began. The burning towers became the dominant narrative, swallowing personal subplots, the way the skyline swallowed her silhouette. You might recall reading one sentence about a missing doctor and then turning the page to photos of firefighters. That collective amnesia tells its own tale about how society ranks tragedies. Large, loud events get monuments. Quiet mysteries drift into footnotes. Listening now, you become part of the counterstory, the group that refuses to let a single name blur into statistics. By picturing Sneha walking those dim streets, by replaying that department store footage in your mind, you grant her a presence the official timeline cannot supply. So what do you carry away from this unresolved knot of dates, images, and competing motives? Maybe it is the reminder that certainty is not a prerequisite for empathy. You can acknowledge the conflicting portraits of Sneha and still feel the ache of a life cut short, whether by collapsing towers or by something hidden in the city's shadows. You can let her story sharpen your attention the next time a headline threatens to flatten a complex human into a single line of text. And when you visit the memorial or simply pause in front of the open sky where the towers once stood, you might whisper her name, not for answers, but so the silence knows it has been heard. And perhaps that whisper is enough today.